you inspired me to do this stuff. I had no idea people were actually playing with data the way that you were when Code for America was getting started, and then the creation of Open Oakland has been such an inspiration to the entire brigade program across the country and to our work, and it's really informed. I think you guys have had an impact not just on Oakland, but nationally, because other people are trying to do this now in the way that you're doing it. And I am partisan, like I do tell people that Oakland is the best brigade, but I qualify it that I live here, so I can't actually be trusted. Spike asked me to talk tonight about two things. The time I spent last year in Washington, D.C. as the Deputy Chief Technology Officer, and then kind of where Code for America is going, and there's a little bit of a connection between those two things. I could talk for hours about the crazy stuff that happened in D.C. I'm going to tell just a little bit, just like a couple of key pieces that tie back to sort of what's going on more locally. But it's really just a tee up for us to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So let me do my best to sort of to walk through that, and we'll see where it takes us in a conversation. And can you guys all hear me back there? I'm not, like, I don't have a naturally projecting voice, so if I start to be quieter, then just come forward, I think. So this is the Code for America office on 9th Street in San Francisco. It's where I go to work every day, but I did take a year off, and I worked in this building, which is the Eisenhower Executive Office building within the White House complex. Those gates in front mean you have to go through the same security that you go into if you're going into the actual White House, which is like here. No, like here. So it's a very different kind of building and a pretty different culture and a very different experience than what I had been doing day to day prior. But I mean, the point of the story, to skip to the end, is that in the end, I think there is a very close tie between what happened to me there and what was happening back at Code for America. So let me start at the beginning. Before I left to go to DC, there was some very interesting stuff going on. This is one of the teams that was working in the same year that Chris and Richa, who I hope many of you know, were working. This was the team that was working with the city of San Francisco, city and county of San Francisco, on a number of issues related to social services, and where they sort of landed was on churn in CalFresh, our state's nutrition assistance program. So that's Jake and Andy and Rebecca and Mark. And they found out a bunch of stuff about nutrition assistance that I didn't know, and I'm going to start with the fact which is the process that you go through if you're trying to apply for CalFresh. This goes on for a while, and this is only part of the process. You stop at 50 screens, and at that point you're supposed to print something out. There are questions in this process. There's hundreds and hundreds of questions. And some of them are things like, have you or anybody in your family been convicted of trading food stamps for guns, drugs, alcohol, or ammunition since April 20th of 1996? There's a whole series of questions that follow that. And if you actually do this process, which the Code for America fellows on that team did, you find out it makes really no sense whatsoever, and it's pretty insulting on top of being pretty complicated. They found out that once you apply for this program and you get on it, you have to figure out where you can use your nutrition assistance, and there's a very difficult set of tools that help you try to find that, and it takes you a while to figure out where you can spend that money. And then they found out something really interesting, which is that most people, once they go through that very, very long application process and then provide a whole bunch of documentation to go with it, and then get finally enrolled in the program at pretty high cost to their time, but also at high cost to the state of California and the county, processing all this information, they then fall off because they start to get notifications in the mail. And I'm going to read, you probably can't read this, but even if you could, I would read it at you because I like to torture people with this. This is a notification that you would get in snail mail, one of many, and this one says, your food stamps benefits this quarter did not change as a result of the documents or information we received because it would not have resulted in an increase in benefits. Your food stamp benefits in this quarter did not change as a result of the documents and information we received because the new rule says that when you report some changes, the county cannot lower your food stamps until the next quarter. Your county has refigured your food stamps. Okay, so I'm not going to keep going, but it goes on like this. And what you would not know from reading pages and pages of this language, this very legal language, is that they're asking you for more documentation. And if you don't provide that documentation, you will not be enrolled in the program. And what happens when you don't provide that documentation is that you are in line at the checkout counter with all of your stuff bagged up and you're ready to go, and you slide that EBT card and it doesn't work. And this was the moment that those fellows really tuned into, was that moment when you're standing there and everybody behind you in line is going, okay, yeah, that person's card doesn't work. The feeling that you have of being judged by the people behind you in line, and the feeling that you have when you go home when you needed that food and you're not bringing it home to your family. Another thing we found out is that a lot of food stamps, EBT cards are used at midnight on Wednesdays because that's when they're recharged. And if you think about who's shopping at midnight, it's people who are hungry and whose families are hungry.
Is it a technical problem?
Pardon?
Technical problem. Maybe a lot of times, like our computer has technical problems.
Well, it is an information problem in the sense of not being able to stay on the program because they're not able to, if they don't provide the documentation that's required, then they drop them off of the program, but they don't know it, so they don't know that their card isn't going to work. So that was the moment that these guys were really trying to avoid, and when I left to go to DC, that was sort of where they were at that point. They'd sort of figured out that this was the problem that they wanted to solve. So from my perspective, I didn't hear anything about it for a while. I went off to DC. I was working for this guy, Todd Park, who until recently was the Chief Technology Officer of our country. He asked me to come because he had created a program called the Presidential Innovation Fellows, which was modeled after the Code for America Fellowship Program. I thought that was a great idea, but I kind of reverse pitched him and said, I run a fellowship program, I love doing that, but I am interested in doing something else, and that would be creating in the United States government an analog to the government digital service that the UK has stood up. Has anyone heard of the government digital service in the UK? Very few of you. Okay, interesting. This is an amazing unit that's located in the center of the UK government. It's part of the Cabinet Office. And it's run by a guy named Mike Bracken, who was formerly the head of digital for The Guardian. So he's run big teams, successfully done a lot of great digital products. And what they do is, one of the things they do is a site called gov.uk, which does an amazing job of both communicating with and transacting with the British people in a way that is truly, and you probably heard me say, if you've ever heard me talk, you've heard me say, in a way that is truly simple, beautiful, and easy to use. The ease of use of the website, both the information part of it and the transaction part, is dramatic and is much like, you know, the best of the consumer web. So instead of the kind of screenshots that we just went through on Cowan, it's stuff like this. Very simple, very clear, very few questions. Carer's allowance is the best equivalent I could think of to sort of a benefit, and I don't know the British system all that well. But they've done this by bringing together an amazing digital team in-house there. They don't do everything in-house. But the results aren't just this great communication, but also the fact that they're doing it for a fraction of what they used to spend on digital services in the UK to get far more users and happier users. And they're spending a fraction of what we are spending on digital services here, especially in the federal government, but also at the local level. And so my goal in going into federal government was, could we have a United States digital service? Could we have tech talent within the federal government that could create interfaces to our government that are truly simple, beautiful, easy to use, and cost less, and serve those citizens better?